guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kiana and today I have a DIY pleated tennis skirt tutorial and a free template that you guys can download, print out, and then use it to follow along during the video. Also, I guess this video is kind of like a Halloween costume idea for Jules from Euphoria because I love Jules. She was my favorite character. So this was like my opportunity to channel Jules. And then I was like searching stuff for Euphoria and then I saw something about Jules and then I found out, I can't like say what building it is, but there's a building I'm looking at right now outside my window that Jules, well, Hunter Schafer has been in multiple times, a multitude of times, and I can't tell you what building that is, but she has been there. And so like I liked her already and now I like obsessed, but not like in a creepy way. Okay, so the thing about the pleated tennis skirt is that the sewing is actually really easy. However, it is a little bit challenging figuring out all the measurements and the math that goes along with it. And that's all done at the very beginning. So if you can get through that, the skirt will be a breeze. Because again, the sewing's easy, it's just the measurements that's hard. So yeah, this is why I made the pattern, because I know that the measurements can be challenging for some people, and I wanted to really make this accessible for everyone. So if like math and the concepts behind these measurements is just not your cup of tea, just like zone out the audio, because I'm going to be explaining throughout this video in detail why we are taking each measurement and how that factors into the skirt. Yeah, so follow along with this. At each part of the video, you can like pause it, fill out the measurements with me, and yeah, just take it step by step. Also, all the sewing equipment that I used in this video will be linked down below, like always. So yeah, I think we can just get right into the video now, and we're gonna start off by taking our measurements. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is take 5 measurements. A is your waist measurement. So that is your waist circumference at your smallest point, aka where you want the skirt to sit, plus 0.5 inches of ease. B is your desired final skirt length, plus 1 inch for the hem allowance, plus 0.5 inches for the top seam allowance. C is your pleat length. My pleat length, I want it to be 4 inches. This is really up to you. I've seen people do a 1-inch pleat. I've seen people do a 6-inch pleat. I wanted to do like a happy medium, so I went for a 4-inch pleat. D is your hip circumference at your pleat length, plus 0.5 inch ease. So I went 4 inches down from my waist, figured out where that was, and then measured my circumference. E, pleat width. I wanted my pleat width to be 1.25 inches. Okay, now that we have those measurements, this is, I guess, the hard part. We need to check and see if those measurements that we took are actually going to work. So take A, your waist, multiply it by 3 because there are 3 folds within each pleat. To get that pleat, you fold the fabric 3 times. So that's why we're multiplying it by 3. So your waist times 3 equals your total width, the width of the fabric that you're gonna cut basically. So my waist was 26 inches. I multiplied it by 3 to get 78 inches. Now we're gonna take the measurement we just calculated and divide it by the pleat width to get the number of pleat folds. However, remember there are 3 folds per pleat. So this number of pleat folds, G, that we're calculating, needs to be a number that is divisible by 3. When I do my calculation, I get 62.4. That's not a number that is divisible by 3. We can't have 0.4 or whatever of a pleat. So you have 2 options to get to a number that's divisible by 3. You can either change E, your pleat width, by a little bit, or you could change F, that total width. And you can change F by adding up to 3/4 to 1.5 inches of fabric to that measurement. And what that is gonna do is just add a little bit extra ease to your skirt, which is fine. So you can play around with measurement E and measurement F to get measurement G divisible by 3. What I ended up doing is I increased measurement F by 0.75 inches, and that got me to 78.75. And I divided it by E, which is 1.25, and I ended up getting 63, which is a number divisible by 3. That is the hard part. After you do that, it's easy, it's smooth sailing. Again, if this is all confusing to you, don't listen to me. Just follow the sheet, okay? And now we can get into the sewing. Woo! Okay, first off, I'm gonna cut my rectangle. And to figure out how big you want your rectangle to be, refer to your template. Mine is 79.75 inches by 18 inches, so she's pretty dang long. And then I'm gonna finish the sides because it makes it easier for us later on. I serged it, you could use a zigzag stitch or pinking shears, whatevs. And then now I'm also going to hem my skirt. This is, controversial because usually you hem at the very end, but rules are meant to be broken and I am a rebel. So I'm gonna do it now just because I want to set my pleats with the hem in it, because like if I hemmed it at the end after I set my pleats, then it's like I'd have to press the hem and then press the pleats back in, and I just don't feel like doing that. So I'm gonna be a rebel and I'm gonna hem it right now. To hem my fabric, I just folded it up a 1/2 inch twice and then just stitched it down, and then, oh, beautiful. At this point, we want to go ahead and mark our pleats. So I marked first a 1/2 inch on each side to account for the seam allowance. And then I'm going to use measurement E, my pleat width, and mark that measurement all the way down the top of the fabric a bunch of times until I get to the very end. At this point, you also want to check and make sure you have the correct number of pleat folds. Gee, I should have 63 pleat folds. Pleat folds are the spaces between those pleat lines. Don't count the space that's the seam allowance, but just double check and make sure you have the correct number of pleat folds. I like to go back in with my scissors and make little like 1/4 inch snips on each of those lines because it's easier for me to line up when I end up folding the pleats. BT dubs, if you saw some random marks between my pleat folds, it's because I was numbering them. Now it's time to fold the pleats. So each pleat has 3 spaces again, but it has 4 lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Lines 2 and 4 will kiss, and lines 1 and 3 will kiss. So I start with 2 and 4, fold those together, and they kiss. Mwah. And then 1 and 3 will kiss. Mwah. And then you just pin that in place, and you're all set. Again, each pleat has 3 spaces and 4 lines. So that 4th line right there, that was part of our first pleat, will end up being the first line for the second pleat. So I'm taking lines 2 and 4 and I'm kissing them together, and then lines 1 and 3 will end up kissing together. And you're just gonna continue this all the way down the skirts and then pin them all in place. I did this to the top and bottom of the skirt, and I made sure that all my folds were going the same way. Bentley wanted to say hello, but then he got shy. I used high heat and steam with my iron to just press the pleats in place. And then, oh my God, look how beautiful the pleats are. And then I was really extra, and I just put my cutting mat and then a bunch of heavy books on top of it for like 24 hours to really set the pleats in place. And also I like all of these pattern making books. So FYI, these are the ones I use. And then after that, I came back 24 hours later, took off all those heavy books, and my pleats were pretty pressed. At this point, hold the skirt up to you, see if it's the correct length for you, actually. I held it up to me and I was like, ooh, girl, that is way too long. So I cut off 2 inches and then I proceeded. Now we are going to mark the length of our pleats. So remember, I wanted my pleats to be 4 inches long. However, we have to remember we have 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top. So I'm marking this pleat length at 4.5 inches. Don't let that trip you up. Now to account for our hips, we need to move over our pleats. So go back to your template, figure out what your hip adjustment J measurement will be. Mine was 0.3214 inches, which is very close to 5/16 of an inch. So I moved over all of those pleats, I pinned them in place, and then we are going to top stitch them down. When I go to the sewing machine, I actually sew straight for 1/2 inch because we have 1/2 inch of seam allowance. And then once I sew for 1/2 inch, I then angle that fabric and I will sew from that 1/2 inch point to the pleat length intersection at that angle. And I do this because if we just angled it from the beginning, we could actually stretch the waist measurement, and then this skirt may not fit you anymore. It might be too big. By the way, I'm a huge proponent of trimming your threads as you go along. Don't wait to the very end. Don't wait till you're done with all of the pleats and then trim your threads. Trim them as you go. Don't be lazy. The threads could all get tangled together and that would be sad. Now we need to cut out the fabric for our waistband. So refer to page 2 of your template to figure out how big your rectangle needs to be. Mine was 27.25 inches by 3.5 inches. And then cut out some interfacing that's 1/2 inch shorter on each side. I first serged the sides of this waistband before pinning it to the waist of my skirt and then sewing along this line. After I do that, I want to go ahead and finish that edge of the skirt. I'm using a serger. You can use zigzag stitches if you don't have a serger. And then I'm also going to preemptively finish the other edge of the waistband. Bringing the skirt over to the ironing board, I'm going to press that seam allowance up, and then on the other edge of the waistband, I'm going to press that seam allowance down 1/2 inch. Now I'm folding the waistband down towards the connecting seam between the skirt and the waistband. So I'm folding it towards that seam line. However, I'm not folding it exactly to the seam line. I'm actually folding it like a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch past that seam line. And you will understand why we did this later on. And then go ahead and give that waistband a nice press. Now it's time to put in the dreaded zipper. Some people think centered zippers are a lot easier. I personally think invisible zippers are a lot easier, so that's what I'm going with today. So looking at that line that we just creased in the waistband, that is basically going to be the starting point for the zipper. You know, you could butt the zipper all the way up to that crease line. However, I like to move my zipper like a 1/4 inch below that line because I like to close the top of the waistband with a hook and eye. I'm going to pin down that zipper. I like all of my pins to point up towards the waistband because it's easier to pull out when you're sewing them. I marked 9 inches down from the top of my zipper with another pin, and that is just marking where I'm going to stop sewing. If you have an invisible zipper foot, great. I still don't have one because, you know, you don't need one. So I'm just using a regular zipper foot to sew all the way down this invisible zipper. Now I'm going to close the zipper and get this zipper prepped to be sewn on the other side. So I take a pin and I mark where that zipper hits on that side on the waistband seam. You see right there. That pin is marked in that seam. And then I also marked where the zipper stops. So I'm then going to fold the zipper over to the other side and pin that in place. Make sure you line up that top pin with the waistband seam. After the zipper is installed, go back to the waistband and fold it the opposite way of the way it's supposed to go. So right sides together and wrong side out. And I'm going to make a little stitch in the seam allowance just down that waistband, just that little stitch right there. And then when you flip it out, ooh, watch the magic happen. How beautiful. Look at that perfect corner. How gorgeous is that? So it now looks perfect on the outside and inside. Wow, a beautiful finish. Also, look how perfect the seam is. It is completely hidden between those two pleats because we did all of those precise measurements at the beginning. So it's just completely hidden, and I just think it makes it look so much better and more professional. Also, I just chopped off the rest of that zipper. We didn't need it, but make sure your zipper is closed before you chop it off. And then we're gonna just continue down that line that we stopped at with the zipper to finish the seam. Also remember, I did hem this skirt at the very beginning, so when I'm sewing up the side seam, I have to be really careful to make sure that both sides match up. That's why you are not supposed to hem until the end in case it doesn't match up, and then you can make sure that your hem is even, but I was living on the edge. So I am gonna end up tacking down the seam allowance right here just to make sure it's not ever gonna be visible. To secure the waistband, we are going to stitch in the ditch, aka stitch right in this seam. If you find this difficult, you can top stitch on the actual waistband about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. Remember when we creased the waistband and folded it a little bit over this seam line right here? That is because we were planning on stitching in the ditch. And if we sew in that seam line, it'll catch the waistband on the back side. So this is what it ends up looking like on the inside, and then this is what it ends up looking like on the outside, completely invisible. Again, if this is too difficult, you can go ahead and top stitch on the waistband instead. By the way, I said I was going to tack that seam allowance, and then I also just added a hook and eye. If your pleats happen to be hanging a weird way, also just go back to the ironing board and give your pleats a nice press so that they're laying nice and flat. And then after that, oh, I was finished! Woo! Okay, so that was it. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial. I hope it made sense to you. I tried to make it like doable for everyone, so hopefully I did a good job. Or maybe I was awful, I don't really know. Hopefully I wasn't. Also, I really vibed being Jules for the day. Let me know if you have any other Halloween like costume requests that I can put out next Monday, because I don't have a video planned and I'm scrambling to come up with an idea. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok. It's Kiana Bonolo for both of those. I do Q&As and I post some extra stuff on those platforms, so definitely give me a follow there. I will link it down below. Subscribe to me here and like this video if you liked it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching my video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!